Hi folks, welcome to my Bit Retro Journal. I recently did a video showcasing ICE, which is the graphical environment that I run on my QL. It stands for Icon Controlled Environment. It came out in 1985, and in that video I actually put my QL in monochrome so you could see the whole screen. Because it's a US version, the NTSC signal cuts off the bottom portion of it, so you can't see all the, there's a set of menus at the bottom. Today what I want to do is to demonstrate, so ICE is the file manager that lets you sort of browse through files, gives you graphical icons, but it also has a window manager called Choice, and I got it off of my micro drive, and so I wanted to demonstrate that because it's actually kind of a cool piece of software that runs in conjunction with ICE and really gives you sort of a very much of a workbench, or maybe even more so multi-finder for the Macintosh back in the mid-80s. Again, Choice was software that came with the with ICE back in 1985. It's not one that I used very often. It works better if you have more memory, but it certainly can work with 128K one as well, and I'm going to demonstrate that. It has some cool features, and best of all, it requires very little resources. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my camera in front of the QL on the screen so you can kind of see me working, and that way you get a better screen of that. I don't know if I'll do the full screen or just sort of an angle. I've been working with different things, so let me give that a try. All right, here we go. So I have my QL set up so you can see the QL as well as the screen. Hopefully that's not a bad view. So what I want to demonstrate today with Choice, which is sort of a window manager, that without it, what it gives you versus without it, I want to show you first what happens in the QL if you don't have something like Choice. Now the QL came out 2 weeks before the Macintosh in 1984 in February or January. And it was the first computer that had a preemptive multitasking microkernel, and the Amiga 18 months later was the second to do so. What I'm going to show you is that I'm going to run Baton, which is a sort of a line drawing program, and QED, which is a text editor similar to ED on the Amiga. I'm going to run them concurrently, and I'll show you what the problem is. So if I'll do mode 4, which is higher resolution. And if I go exec mdv2 QED, which is the editor, and again I'm actually using real micro drives because my V drive currently is broken. But if I use QED, that's just going to be a simple text editor, and so notice I can go from the command line to the editor, and I can say, and this will create a new file. Hello. Now I can go back to the command line. Again, it kind of overwrites things, so that's sort of the negative part of it. But I can actually go down here and say exec mdv2 baton, which is the it's a little line program. Baton twirl, I think, is what it's called fully. And again, it's going to read it from the micro drive, and you'll see that it's going to clear the screen as soon as it reads it. And here I can just say the full 45, and it's just going to do a line drawing program. Now, it turns out that my editor is still there. I can actually type in it. But you can see the mess that is right now. The baton twirling program is kind of overriding my my screen. And of course, I can still go into the directory and get a directory listing if I want. And so everything kind of, again, you can see it's just kind of a mess. And so so I'm going to just restart. What Choice is going to do for us is it's going to allow us to do the same thing, but this time not have Windows overridden. So let me demonstrate how to do that. So before I do that, though, I'll also demonstrate a couple other things that came with Choice. One thing that came with Choice is the ability to change the background color of the green part. And so there's a small basic program actually that comes with it that lets you change the color. So let me play with that first before I create the tasks menus. So if I click on this, it's going to start a basic program that kind of gives you a similar look for the screen. And yeah, it says, is the desktop color okay? If I say no, if I try 255, and it's very shimmery because again it's composite. But if this were on a RGB to HDMI, it would look just like the Macintosh. In fact, if I say sure and then do that, you'll see that now the background is this color. Again, very shimmery, so not perfect. But let me go back and rerun it, and I'll show you some of the other colors. Although I won't refresh it constantly. Like I said, if I had this on a monitor with a cable for a monitor as opposed to composite, this would look beautiful. And so going back to the color one, it'll default to green. And here I can say no. And so I can do colors like, if I do 3, that gives me red. I can do white. Well, that's black. I can do white. So literally this would give me a white background. Which would look kind of weird if you take a look at that real quick. I mean, that's minimalistic. Let's see. Let me do something that's going to speed this up, and I'll show you the second one. I'll come back to the color one in a second. One thing that Choice gives you is the ability to do a RAM disk. So let me do that first. So if I open Choice up, so it's an application is about 20 to 22K in size, and it allows me to create these switchable task menus. But one of the other features it has is it'll create a RAM disk. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the RAM disk, and I'm going to quit. So now what I have is I can actually format a RAM disk. Had I done this before and I would have clicked this, it would have said, device not ready. But now that I have to install the RAM disk, I can actually put in here, say, let's see, if I do 5, that gives me 2.5K. I think that's enough for, so now I have a RAM disk, and that actually gives me enough for, yeah, that'll give me enough to copy the color thing. So that way I can reload the color thing rather quickly, as opposed to having to rely on micro drives. So what I can do is I can copy color onto my RAM disk, and I'll say 1 file to copy, and there it is. So now I can run it from my RAM disk much faster. And so other colors, I could do 240, which gives me sort of a, oh, that's still the same. No, let's do 235, I think is, yeah, that gives me sort of a pinkish. If I do 215, I think that gives me, yeah, light green. Actually, this is my favorite one. Again, if it weren't for the shimmering, I think 210 is dark red, yeah, purplish sort of. So you can have all sorts of colors. I'm going to go back to 5, I believe is the green one, which looks pretty good. And then you can say yes, and I think green is the default for that. And then you can also, by the way, you can save this as well. There is a, it's under here. So you can set controls, which I showed last time, but then you can save your choices, and what it'll do is it'll actually create a, I'll do it. Oh, it must have saved it. Yeah, it saved it on the RAM disk. Interesting. But I'd have to copy that to, and you can look what's in it. Oops. Yeah, again, I've gotten used to knowing where it is. So it's very little information, but it gets the defaults as well as the, but basically it would want this file right here to be sitting on MDV1, because that's the one it boots off of. All right, let's go back to let's go back to our choice, and I'll show you how to create a so again, the color program was one of the things on the choice MDV, but then the choice program itself is the window manager. And now if I run this, what I can do is I can create an application or a suite that will run two or four programs. So here we go. I want to install a task. Choose your task and define task. And so I'll do QED, which is our text editor, 2 kilobytes. Yes, it's going to reserve display, and it actually has a refresh key, which is F5. And then we are going to do task 2, which is again baton. It's also 2K. It is not going to preserve display. Again, if we had extra memory, we could do the 32K. We are going to set the control keys. So Control F3. We're going to save this task, and we're going to do it to MDV2, and we're going to call it test. Yes. And so then we're going to go return to menu. So it's getting cut off on the screen, but there's a return menu, and then we can quit the task. And take a look at what we have. And here we have it. So now if I start it up. All right, so click to begin to load QED. Take a while to load it in. So it's actually starting it up now. And again, with the micro drives, it does take a while. Although if I had V drive, it would be just as long. So far, the micro drives have held out okay. Been using them now for on a few occasions, both to do videos and also to do some work. But hopefully, it'll read it fine. And then Baton exe, and they're all about 6 to 8K programs, so it's not huge. Does work pretty well when they work. Hopefully we'll get lucky and there won't be any issues. Oh, here we go. So then it comes up with this task menu, so I can click on QED, and that will now bring this up. And so yeah, I can then go to Control F3 and go to Baton, and here we go, 45, and that'll run. But you'll note now that when I go back to Control F3 and QED, it'll refresh it, and it actually stops the Baton twirler from running, and you get your full screen. So I can then write a little program here. Print hello world 20, go to 10, and again I can go back to Control Baton twirler. It's running. I can actually also go back to Control and notice, first of all, these things aren't aligning because it's NTSC versus PAL, but I can go back to ICE, and things are still working. I can look at my micro drives. Now, what it does at this point with ICE is it actually will not let you it won't actually let you execute any other programs. So that's the interesting part here. So if I once it shows me something, I'll try to relaunch QED, because it's a so if I try to if I try to relaunch even the color basic one, So it has deactivated that, so it can't actually. I can copy files, rename them if I want, but I can't do anything else, right? So the oops, right? I don't want to copy, but I could copy things if I wanted. Oh, I didn't want to delete them, right? But I could choose QED and rename it. If I want it, but it will not let me launch something. And the way I get back, so actually Control F3 does not work. What I have to do is quit ICE. Here from the future, if I actually go back in ICE, the one thing I wanted to show that I hadn't was that, or forgot to show, was that the amount of memory for this particular 2 jobs. So this says it has 5 jobs running. So that's QDOS, ICE, the test TSK, and then Baton EXE and QED. So it considers those all 5 as separate jobs. And yeah, it's got those running, and with again, without reserving any screen memory. So just those 2 programs, you still have 47K free. So again, if the choice only takes up memory if you want to preserve the screen, and since QED has its own screen refresh, you don't really have to do that. So I thought that was kind of cool. But back to the oops, and again, that brings me back to where I was, and then I can go right back to Baton EXE, and it's running. I can go back to Control F3 and go back to QED. And this will now if I want, I can save my program MDV2 hello bass, and that'll save it. And I can go back to while it's saving it, I can go back to Baton, still saving it. Baton will run, and then I can also final thing I can do is I can actually quit the whole thing, right? So this will quit the entire suite. Yes, and now I'm back to where I was. I can start running applications again if I want. I'll run the color one again. Actually, I'll run the little basic program that I just created, right? So yeah, so you have to bear with me using the old micro cartridge. It's a little slower. With ICE, it does take a little bit longer. So if you look at hello.bas, it's right here. And I believe view is right there. I can view it to screen. And again, if you're wondering, how does he remember these things? Well, I have a little booklet here as well. And you can see that it shows you all of the things. And you just kind of know where to line up. And I just got used to that because back in the day I only had a TV to use it. So here's my program, and then I can run it. Ta-da! And so yeah, so that is the choice window manager that gives you a little bit extra on the ICE part. So it really makes ICE much more like Multifinder back in the late 80s when the Mac came out with that. And gives you a way to manage your color, and gives you background, gives you so the choice cartridge and then the choice itself. And the really cool thing about this is that you actually don't need choice. So I'm going to delete choice. Ready? I'm going to delete choice from yes. So it doesn't exist, and this task will still run because this is just a standalone task. So choice, all choice does is create this task. It actually doesn't do anything special with regard to it doesn't need to be running. It just creates this test task, and this one will just run all by itself, just like it did before. Yeah, and it'll just load it up again. So let me reboot because I don't want to load these up again. But so. Yeah, choice, pretty cool program, and these task files that you get, you can then, I mean, if the QL had persisted in ICE and Eidersoft had continued creating ICE, and refined it, you can imagine that you could have sold suites of programs under these task files that you could have sold with your program if you had ICE, and then it would have just launched your suite of tasks each time. So this is an independent, and it's only it's about 3K in size, so it's actually not even that much overhead. So this is the little program that decides how to task swap out and whether to set aside 32K of memory. So yeah, choice. A cool little window manager that came with ICE that gave you, that sort of fixed one of the problems on the QL with its windows overriding each other. So that's all I wanted to show you today. So I'm going to end here, and thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.